Good afternoon. I want to welcome everyone to the first meeting of our Rutherford County Solid Waste Advisory Steering Council, and want to also thank all the participants for being here. For those who are watching, whether you're on City TV 3 or you're watching on Rutherford County Channel 19, I think what Mayor Burgess and I, besides everyone introducing themselves who are on the council, to be able to explain sort of why we're here. And Mayor, I'll turn it over to you to sort of let you start, and then I'll follow up.
Okay, thank you, Shane. And again, I'd like to welcome every one of you as well. So it's nice to see a really good group of interested citizens out come here tonight just to see us start off on this journey. A very, very, very important journey. And it might be sort of the first time we've really done this. Every jurisdiction in the county is represented sitting here tonight, which is a wonderful thing. And that just tells you what an important issue we're trying to discuss here. Where are we going in 7 or 8 or 9, 10 years, ever how many years it turns out, before we don't have the ability to continue to deposit our waste in the Middle Point landfill. So it's a complicated process, as most all of you know very well, and it's going to take much effort, and we've engaged a pretty significant group of folks here to help us participate in this discussion, and we've have selected Murfreesboro and Rutherford County, and now we've had all the other jurisdictions that come aboard with us, a talented group of consultants here that are going to be leading this discussion today. So we're going to hopefully develop some alternatives. Maybe we'll get 1 or 2 things that really will be important, some short-term, some long-term, but it's critical, folks, that we come to some reasonable understanding of where we're going, because the costs are just too great for us not to have a really well thought out plan. So we're just happy you're here, and we just hope that you'll all participate. And all of you, we've got some folks here that, are we going to let them just introduce themselves? Yeah. Okay, so we'll just start now, and then we'll let our consultants take the leadership here. But Ms. Hickerson, start with you and just tell us who you are and what your role is in life.
My name is Mary Hickerson, and I'm the department coordinator at the Rutherford County Highway Department.
My name is Lenise Warwick-Patrick, and I'm recently retired from the Tennessee Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations, and have been living here in the county for 35 years.
I'm Andrew Ellard, and I'm the city manager in the city of Eagleville.
Garland Russell, Fleet and Street Department, City of LaVergne.
Kyle Brown, Assistant City Administrator for LaVergne.
I am Michael Cush. I am a County Commissioner for District 7, and I am a environmental engineer with a degree from the University of Oklahoma, and have a long background in environment and civil engineering, infrastructure products, and stormwater quality.
Shane McFarland, Mayor Murfreesboro.
H.G. Cole with the Smyrna Town Council.
Jeremy Harrison, President of All-in-One Recycling.
Kathy Mathis, Environmental Science, MTSU.
I'm Joe Whitefield, Assistant Vice President of Facility Services at MTSU.
I'm Kurt Wade, City Councilman, Murfreesboro.
Before we turn over to our consultants, would want, for those who are not familiar with the process, this started a couple of years ago, actually over a breakfast that Mayor Burgess and I had at B. McNeil's with Jeff Davidson and Rob Lyons, where we said, okay, we really need to talk about what's happening in the future. You know, we don't want to be the group to kick the can down the road and not do anything. And we've had to make some really tough decisions in Murfreesboro. We spend roughly $5.5 million a year picking up trash. And the numbers that we have heard that it could cost us double that moving forward in the future. So under Mayor Burgess's leadership, city leadership, and so excited to have all the jurisdictions represented, we picked through a competitive process, a very able consultant. The consultant that we had rose to the top of the ranks with all the people that were interviewed, and also the groups that were surveyed. So we feel like that Rutherford County is in very capable hands with our group that is here tonight. And so I've just put the ball on the tee for you, teed it up, and we'll turn it over to you to sort of explain why we're here and tell us a little bit about your group.
Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is John Carlton, and I'm Senior Vice President with Gershman, Brickner Bratton. We're the lead consulting on the consultant firm, and we will do some introductions of our consulting team in a little bit. I'd like to just say we're very pleased to be working with you, and honored to be working with you to help create a vision for the county and the cities in the county on a strategy for solid waste. You're looking at some challenges going forward that we will talk about, and trying to create a path for a sustainable future, a financially viable future, and one that meets your goals is one we're helping to work with you on to craft and recommend back to the governing bodies. In your handout here, if I could just go through briefly what they are, you have a copy of tonight's presentation. Feel free to mark it up, put down questions you may have. After that is the agenda for tonight. If you see it, we have down to the minute as what we're trying to get through, with 2.5 hours with a 10-minute break in it, so a lot to get through, and we will try to keep on schedule. We have a list of all the SWAC members that represent the county and the 4 communities. We have a draft of the charter for this group, and we'll talk about that a little bit. We're not looking for you to adopt anything tonight. Just for you to be presented to you and for you to consider something as a way to organize your body. And lastly, we have our scope of work. So the city and the county, we feel very fortunate to be hired by them to work with this group, and this is the scope that we were hired to do. So it gives you a sense for what has been asked of us and what we are hoping to accomplish through working with this group here. So with that, we'll go through the presentation and start it off. This is the agenda for all those in the audience too. We will talk, through these various things. We're going to try to get into why we're here, give you a little bit of background on why planning, what is solid waste planning all about. We'll talk a little bit about the state plan. We'll talk a little bit about what the counties and the cities are currently doing with solid waste management. Then we'll take a break, and we will go into some numbers we put together to try to identify your future needs. We've done some projections preliminarily. We're going to get into that a little more as we go forward on that. We'll speak briefly about what options are out there right now from both a policy standpoint as well as technology standpoint, and how they relate to each other. We do have a public engagement firm on our team that is going to help to both educate the public as well as inform the public about the process you're going through, and they will speak a little bit about their process. And then we'll talk about how we move forward. Now we've at least charted out a schedule for how to move this thing forward, and it's up to you, as to whether or not that works for you, but that's something we will discuss. And then we'll open it up to questions, and hopefully we can try to get through as many as we can. We're here to at least 8:30. We're happy to stay later. We want to respect your time as well, so we'll try to keep it to that schedule. All right, so introductions. I know the county and the city has already done this. I'll turn this over to Harvey Gershman, our president.
Thank you, John. Good evening, everyone. First want to thank Murfreesboro and Rutherford County for selecting our team. We put together a team to meet the requirements of your request for proposal. I'll tell you just a little bit about GBB, and then I'll ask the gentleman from the other 2 firms to come up and say a couple words. I got interested in garbage because of Earth Day 1970. So I've been around a while, kicking garbage cans. And in 1980, with some others, we formed an independent consultancy to help people plan and implement better things with their waste. Most notable in our history is an assignment we're doing in Guam. We were appointed by a federal judge to take over the Guam, U.S. territory of Guam, solid waste system, and we're running actually the system there and making it compliant with laws. So we not only advise, but we also operate garbage systems. About 15 years ago, we were hired by Metro Nashville to help them transform their solid waste situation. Some might remember Nashville Thermal, an aging district energy plant that wasn't working very well, and no recycling going on in Nashville. Well, we help transform their system to one with some pretty good recycling and replace thermal with a very reliable district energy system that's running now. But you can check us out on our website where we work all across the country in helping communities plan and implement better solid waste things, and we look forward to helping you figure out what your future should look like. Dave, could you come up and say a few words about your company?
Sure. Thank you, Harvey. I'm Dave Cooley with Cooley Public Strategies based in Nashville, and we work regionally with Harvey and a number of other firms. We're in the business of just trying to communicate the two-way street of communication. Certainly this issue begs that the public not only know what's happening in the county and the local communities, but also that they have the opportunity to have their own input. We bring over 30 years of experience to the job. Over that period, I've had the opportunity to both serve in and outside of government, and hopefully that will be an asset that we can apply to this project.
And we have on our team a local firm that I think some of you may be familiar with also.
My name is Jeff Postel. I'm an engineer, civil engineer, licensed here in the state of Tennessee. Our company is located in Nashville, so we regularly do work throughout the state, especially in Middle Tennessee. So our purpose on this project is to provide a local level of expertise dealing with the local folks.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, now back to John.
All right, if there are questions, I think we're willing to, entertain them as you have them, as long as we can try to keep on schedule. So please, if there's something that's bothering you or you have a question on, don't hesitate to let us know. I'd also like to introduce Kate Vasquez. Kate is with GBB as well, and she'll be helping me do the presentation. She'll also be helping me to manage the planning process here for this project. So the draft charter. As you probably know, we've been working with we're calling it the working group of folks that represent the city and the county who initially hired us and came up with the understanding of, we really need to get a broader representation across the county to include Eagleville, LaVergne, Smyrna, as well as, private sector, education, the different things that we can try to bring a coalition of people together to bring some good ideas and feedback to the group. And as part of that process, there has a draft of what we're calling a charter for this group. This will give it some organization, give it some guidance as to how you operate, if there's decisions to be made, how they're made, et cetera. So you have, as before you, a draft of the charter. Again, we're not looking to have you do this. I just wanted to give you some of the highlights of what this is and suggest that if you wanted to entertain a formal way to organize a group, this is one way to do that. A couple things is that the scope and charge is to advise the local governments on the future of solid waste management. That's pretty much it, is to go through this process with us. At the end of this process, we're going to have, hopefully, a vision and a plan and recommendations. And it's to bring that back to the governing bodies that will consider them, look at the impacts of them, what we're trying to accomplish here, and be that intermediary with that group. We're 15 members. I think we're close to that. I think we're probably missing one maybe at this point, or two. But it's 15 members, and you have the membership list. As part of this, we are recommending that you have, some appointed leadership in the form of a chair and vice chair. So that would be however you'd want to do that. Also, to the extent that you want to have working committees to look at, maybe specialty areas, maybe there's a technology area or a policy area, or, you know, a service area such as collection. You know, how do you want to get involved? What do you want to influence through the planning process? So those are committees that could be established. You can make them up as to how big or large you want. They can report back. So not everybody needs to get involved in every, you know, decision, for example. So those are some ideas. The staff support, the county has graciously offered to provide help through the solid waste department to, you know, if there are questions that need to be researched, in addition to what we are offering as the consultants through our scope of work. And lastly, there's going to be a need to get together from time to time, whether it be on the phone, through conference calls, through workshops, special meetings, whatever they are. We have put forth, as you'll see in our scope, 3 workshops. This is the first of those 3. Progressively, we're going to try to get through a vision process, a way to create a vision, try to answer questions, come up with what you want to see as the future of solid waste. So by the end of that 3rd workshop, you feel you have recommendations. And then from there, the idea is to maybe try to float those ideas to the public to see how they feel about it, and then bring it back to your governing bodies. So that is the proposed bylaws, if you will, of the SWAC. And unless there's any questions, we'll just let that stay for now.
John, you know, I've read this document, and most of us have, I'm sure, but is this something that you normally do with this kind of process? And we've got all the jurisdictions here now engaged, but really this group here doesn't have any authority to make real decisions on what we're going to do. But as I read what you're saying here, it's largely to give some direction and at some point provide some recommendations to each of us, which hopefully might at some point down the road lead to some sort of interlocal agreements of some sort of one another. Is it much beyond that, as far as, because we're not going to have any real power or authority to spend money or do otherwise, just simply make recommendations that would be, hopefully, we would have some consensus on from all our jurisdictions, because we're all sitting here already.
Well, what you just said is hopefully have consensus on, and hopefully that's the case. You know, I think with any group, you know, you may have different opinions, you may have different ideas on how to move forward, and I think this is to give some direction as a body to making a group decision. So the Solid Waste Advisory Council recommends this. If you want that, you know, that's up to you as to whether or not you want that type of way. It's, you know, we've worked with other solid waste advisory councils across the country. Most of them are organized. Most of them have a standing role throughout the, they're almost established through law, either county law, state law, and they have a purpose of advising the local governments, usually on a county basis or state basis for solid waste planning. So it's up to you. We just thought that, you know, to the extent that you are a body that's going to need to have deliberation, to have some type of advice that comes out, you know, what that voice is. If everyone is in agreement, then that's great. But if not, you know, what that process is going forward.
What's the wishes of the committee, Shane? What do you think? I mean, I don't think you want us to approve this tonight.
We're not asking you to make decisions unless you want to have some discussion on that here.
I think it's appropriate, since we have, you know, a pretty diverse section of the county and all of our jurisdictions that have approved. I would hope that the legislative bodies, that all of us are taking the time and going through this process. I would think that our legislative body, with having a council member and the mayor on here, I think that they would extremely they would want to hear what the group has to say. So I'm fine either way. I don't think we have to vote on bylaws tonight if we want to chew on that till the next meeting. But
right, these are just if you wanted to consider such, they're a draft for you to consider, and as a group you can make a decision whether or not you want them or not.
Any of the other members of this group, if you have any strong feelings about this or questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay. So why are we here? Well, one reason that we're here is that solid waste has not disappeared. Earth Day happened in 1970, and I think we've been trying to find ways to reduce, reuse, and recycle waste ever since. and our waste still continues to grow. In addition, Murfreesboro and Rutherford County are very fast-growing regions. You are the fastest, I think, proposed growing region in the state, one of the largest from a population standpoint. And we are seeing that there is a tremendous growth of people, and with people and businesses come waste. So looking at this, you're at about 300,000 people in the county right now. The forecasts over the next 15 years, 20 years are to be at, I think, 420,000 people. So there's a lot of growth in this county. It's about, I think, 2.3% per year, compounded growth. And again, when you look at what the state looks at all the different counties, the growth curve of Rutherford County is the steepest. And with that, it's going to come challenges. Your growth in solid waste has outpaced your growth in population, and that could be expansion of business, it could be the economy, it could be a variety of things that influence solid waste. But you have growing waste, and you're going to need a way to deal with it. Additionally, and probably most importantly as to why we got brought in, is that your landfill that you are relying on, both as the county and as the regional landfill, is expected to run out of capacity in the next 8 years. If not before, maybe after. It all depends on how things work with that landfill. The county has a class 3-4 landfill right next to the Middle Point landfill. That is, it serves the county's construction, demolition, things of that nature, inert materials, basically. But that landfill has about capacity for about only 4 years. But the bigger issue is that the county has been using the Middle Point landfill, in the county. It's operated by, it's operated by a number of people, but Republic Services is what we're referring to, Allied. They've gone through different name changes over the years. And with that facility reaching capacity, there's going to be impacts to the county and the city. And we'll go through them, but most importantly, the county and the city have what's called host community agreements. So when a landfill or any type of solid waste facility sites in a community, oftentimes as a good neighbor policy, and because to mitigate the impacts, if you will, or to compensate for the impacts of the facility, there's an agreement in place. And this agreement provides very beneficial financial responses to both the city and the county. And when that landfill closes, those benefits stop. So just to give you a sense of what these agreements provide, first of all, for all the county waste, which is about 38,000 tons a year that comes through the recycle centers, that waste gets disposed of at no cost to the county. In addition, the city, which generates around 42,000 tons a year, can deliver its waste to the landfill at no cost to the city. The county receives a benefit, a financial benefit of $1.20 for every ton of out-of-county waste that comes to the landfill, and right now that is about 650,000 tons a year, and that goes right to the county general fund. And there's other benefits too. Republic provides hauling services for several city dumpsters at no cost. The city receives a premium on the leachate that is discharged. There are other benefits that are quantifiable, and to give you a sense for when that landfill closes, the loss of the host fee, which is at $1.20, is approximately 780,000 tons a year, or excuse me, $780,000 a year. But more importantly, the free disposal that you're currently getting is if you went to a market rate of, say, $55 to send it somewhere, that's both a transportation and disposal number, hypothetically, that's over $2 million a year to the county. For the city, it's $2.3 million. So that's where the real money is going to come from an impact standpoint. In addition, as a result of that, you can expect that the cost of being a resident or a cost of doing business in the county will go up. because, you know, waste disposal is part of a city service. It's part of what the county provides as a service, and you know, businesses have that cost too when they generate. So if that waste has got to go to a different facility at a different price, it's going to have an impact. So we'll next talk about comprehensive planning and why we are doing that. Kate will take that from here.
Thanks, John. I'm Kate Vasquez with GBB, and I'm very excited to be here because I love solid waste planning. And also, my mom was in Band of Blue, and I came here 30 years ago, and as you know, it's a lot different than it was then. So we need to turn to this solid waste comprehensive planning to help us move forward with the challenges that John has described. Solid waste planning provides sort of the blueprint for what you're going to do in the long term. And you can see here some of the benefits of it. It's going to gather in information from the public, gathers in information from experts, both on staff and consulting. But what it really does is it empowers your communities to have the best possible system for all your participants in it. Now, GBB has done a lot of solid waste management planning, and we have some examples of these types of plans. Harvey is going to talk to you briefly about Maui County, which was one of our former clients with a very comprehensive integrated plan.
The state of Hawaii requires the counties to do planning, and we were really grateful for that state law because we got selected to go to Maui to do a solid waste plan. Great place to have to, you know, look at garbage, and you can do some other things in between. But they had, they called it they had a solid waste resource advisory committee, sort of like you. And they really got into things. They were briefed on all sorts of issues. We sent you the link of that plan, which is still online. I think maybe some of the links are broken, but you all have access to that document, and we really want you to read that document. It was done a number of years ago, but not much has changed. So there's a lot of good information in there to read and understand, because that's what we're trying to do with this plan. We had the assistance there of some local mediators to help run the meetings, like we have with Dave's group, and we came up with both goals and scenarios of how their system would change and what the costs would be for doing that. Where's the... okay. Thanks. This is a picture of the cover of the plan. This plan was basically, the plan represents the recommendations from that committee. We were the scribe of, you know, writing it, but by providing all that background information, taking them on a tour of facilities, mainly on the West Coast, to see some good examples of solid waste management practices, help them understand garbage. They really went through a learning process. And the results of that plan were presented to the county council at 2 long briefings, and they accepted the plan. And it went to the state, and they accepted the plan. So this plan was approved by the standing council at the time and the state at the time. So we really encourage you to read this carefully, and feel free to send us emails with questions and bring them up at the upcoming meetings as well. There's a little more about it. I've kind of said all this, so we're good. I'm going backwards. Oh. All right, sorry about that. There you go.
Okay, so we have here on your next slide, slide 16, it's the objectives, examples of the type of solid waste planning objectives, and these are from the TDEC plan that's current for the state of Tennessee. The plan states 9 objectives, but then you have sort of the implied objective and intention of a plan, which is to implement all the strategies that are listed in it. Without an implementation approach, you've got some good ideas, but you're also going to need how you're going to do it, who's going to do it, how you're going to pay for it. Here's an example of in detail how the goals look. The first line on slide 17 is a goal of reducing waste generation. That's a pretty ambitious goal that you see there, reducing from a statewide average of a little over 5 pounds per person per day to a little more than 3 pounds per person per day. Line 3, goal 3 of the statewide recycling goal shows the current state rate of 33.9. We'll show a slide coming up here that's going to look at your tons generated in this area. You're slightly below that, but there is a lot of room for improvement, and 45% is a good goal that is very achievable for the state. So to talk about the current status with your programs in this region, to go through these quickly, I'm going to have John come back up and go through these.
All right.
Can I ask a question quickly here?
Of course.
The difference in Class 1 and Class 3 and Class 4 garbage?
Class 1 is garbage. Municipal solid waste, it's putrescible waste. It's waste that when it degrades requires more protection than something that's a little bit more inert, like the demolition debris or construction debris. Class 3, 4 is that type of material. That also includes tires, shredded tires, things of that nature. But think of it as, a higher level of protection is needed for Class 1. Class 3, 4 is a lower level of protection needed from the standard of environmental protection. If one understand, Class 2 is like industrial landfills, but those are not really of issue here in the county.
Thank you.
The county has a Class 3, 4 landfill. Middle Point is a Class 1 landfill.
Sums it up.
Class 1 can accept 3 or 4 materials, but Class 3, 4 landfills cannot accept Class 1 materials. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I believe, John, back to the young lady, did you say 45% is pretty easily achievable?
Yes,
on recycling?
Yes, sir. I think a third or more is doable, especially if you're also including garbage.
And I just I believe we're under 20% in Rutherford County now, or maybe this is the whole state. Do you have any numbers on that?
We have some coming up on a later slide.
Okay.
Looked at your current disposed and your current recycled and recovered. We're calculating you just a hair below 30%. So that's good. It's a little bit below the national average also, but it's definitely a strong foundation on which to build.
Okay, thank you.
The county and the communities in the county have been providing solid waste services to their residents and businesses for years. This is the current services that are provided, and we'll go into a little bit more detail on this. And this gives you a sense for both population as well as growth. And as you can see, there is fairly significant growth, especially in the city, in the town of Smyrna. The level of service depends. I think, for example, in city of Murfreesboro, there's a much higher level of service than some of the other communities. The county does provide, obviously, the landfill and the recycle centers, but does not provide collection services per se. So just going through individually. There we go. Oops. There we go. All right. So you have 14 recycling centers. For solid waste and recycling in one, it's only for recycling. So the solid waste and centers can handle, household debris, things of that nature. Anyone can drop off things at those centers, as well as provide for recycling. And the names used to be convenience centers. They changed the name to recycling centers, so it emphasizes the word recycling and and puts the right emphasis on what we're trying to achieve here. There is curbside collection of solid waste. It's done by private haulers like All in One. And it's on an individual subscription basis, meaning that you got to call up the supplier, whether it's your local hauler, and ask for service. And they bill you directly. There's no government involved in between. From what we've seen, it's about $17 a month for solid waste, and I think it's around $14 a month for recycling. Because there's not a economy of scale, that recycling number's, a bit high, but I think compared to, say, other communities that have a comprehensive recycling program, because you don't have, house after house that you could stop in and then get some economy of scale. But those are the current prices. As we mentioned about the county landfill, it's owned and operated. The class 3-4 materials, yard weight brush. C&D stands for construction and demolition. So C&D, we use a lot of acronyms in our industry, so if we ever start spitting stuff out that you don't understand, please stop us, because Lord knows we don't want to miss you on some concepts. Again, we have about 4 years of capacity there. And the bigger issue for the county and the cities is Middle Point Landfill. Republic Services owns and operates. It is a Class 1 facility. It can handle other materials such as Class 3-4, but it's primarily looking at Class 1, and again has about 8 years of capacity. In the city, there is curbside collection provided in carts being 96 gallons. I think that's about a half a cubic yard as things go. And solid waste is provided in those carts, as well as brush collection in the city. Both residents and small businesses that kind of collect like residents. So if you're a business and you can put out your waste in a 96-gallon cart, I think you're offered service through the city program. The city also has a mulching facility where they take the brush that they collect at the curb, they bring it over, they process it, they grind it, and they provide mulch free of charge to people that want it. The recycling, the convenience center, where is where the recycling services are provided in the city. Sorry, a little finicky. Smyrna provides brush debris, yard waste brush collection services to their residents. They do it through their streets department. Things are collected in craft bags, which is brown paper, heavy-duty brown paper bags, and it's taken to a mulching site. From the standpoint of solid waste and recycling services, residents are either encouraged to sign up through a private hauler, individual subscription, or to use the county's recycling centers that are available to the county and city residents. LaVergne similarly provides brush collection services, directs people to their county recycling centers, as well as provides individual subscription to haulers. And pretty much the same with Eagleville, except they don't provide brush collection services. Okay.
What would be good to know is if anyone knows the subscription rates in the cities, what people are charged per month. Is it different from what we described for Rutherford County? The
17 and 14.
And the 14 for collection of waste and then collection of recyclables. Is that about the same amount?
As I understand it. I don't personally use a private collector, but from conversations with people, at least I knew that was the area that was in.
So that'd be a total, if one wanted to do both, that'd be $31 per month per household. That sound about right?
People usually pay in quarters, so just multiply it by 3.
Well, I would assume the city probably has their number since they collect.
City of Murfreesboro has
They should have their number of what it costs them to collect each individual.
We have that information, and that'll be shared in a future meeting.
All right. So looking at slide 25, this is the slide I was referring to before, Mr. Mayor, showing some aggregate data for 2015. The yellow, the top line there, you've got some disposal figures of 3.228 to 3.3 million tons. That's for the region, and about 6 pounds per person per day disposed. So this I did want to step back. That is a correction of, this is for the region, the average recycling rate that I was mentioning that was a little bit below 30. Recycling is almost 1 million tons, and then we've also got some digestion and composting of organic material, which includes some food waste, a lot of yard waste, and some biosolids, that's the byproduct from wastewater treatment, and some other processes. And when you put the recycling plus, the red plus the green, over everything disposed, that's where you get about 29.3% for the region. So that's all of you guys together, plus some other neighbors on average. This is getting sourced from the reports that are turned into the state, as you can see there at the bottom. All right, so here is a map of the state, as we know, and we wanted to pull this up because it's, again, this is reflecting what tons of landfill disposal. The more intense the color, the more tons out of that county. It is broken up by the counties. And of course, we can clearly identify the 3 large cities plus our other growing cities. What I really want to point out here is it's not only the counties where the cities, with the big cities where we see the intense color, you see regions expanding and growing, a corridor going up from Chattanooga, expanding region around Nashville. This reflects the increase and the growth of the waste, as we've talked about population growth bringing waste generation growth. I want to ask Harvey to come up and talk a little bit with his extensive experience here in Middle Tennessee. I saw Harvey present about some of his Nashville work once a long time ago, and it won me over to come to GBB, so take it away.
Thanks, Kate. All right, so see the bottom button, right?
Yes.
Whoops, not the brake. Here we go. All right. So right now, Metro Nashville government has a request for proposal to do an update to their solid waste plan. They're about to start a similar process to figure out where they should take their existing system, which has recycling, let's say, about 30% or so, and figure out what to do to get as close to zero waste as possible to go along with, to meet the state plan, material management plan requirements. So they're on a similar path, and they're concerned, their waste is, most of the waste from Nashville, Davidson County is coming to the Middle Point landfill. There is a pretty innovative facility that got built close to here in Lebanon, a gasification project that takes 64 tons per day of wood chips and sewage sludge to make energy. So that's a project that is pretty interesting to see. It doesn't take municipal solid waste currently, and may look to in the future.
But it also takes about 10% tires, right?
That's right. Some tires as well. I think they have to be shredded.
They do.
Now, just for those that go back in time like myself, you may remember the Nashville Thermal Facility, which was a 1,000 ton per day facility, a facility that took unprocessed solid waste and turned it into steam and chilled water, and heated and cooled, not as reliably as people in the buildings would have liked, but heated and cooled about 36 buildings in 1999 when we were asked to look at the system because it was getting too expensive to run as well as unreliable. And the new mayor there, Mayor Purcell, wanted to also think more about recycling. And that facility actually had a big fire in 2001 and had to close early while we were building the new district energy facility. Fortunately, we were able to keep things going, but that was a very, very innovative project facility that lasted almost 30 years, providing energy services. And facilities like that are running in other cities, Baltimore, Minneapolis, Indianapolis, Detroit, where they're providing ongoing district energy and power production services using garbage as a fuel. In Gallatin, there was a facility there, and I don't know the current status today, but it was a 200 ton per day municipal waste energy facility making steam for industries. And it closed for MSW in 2005 because it couldn't afford to add the necessary equipment to meet the new Clean Air Act Amendment requirements. It couldn't afford, they decided they didn't want to pay the extra cost for that. They converted the facility to fire wood and tires, shredded tires. And I just hadn't been able to find if it's still working on that currently. But those were two very innovative projects in Tennessee that we remember converting waste to an energy product. The output of these plants is a residue, an inert residue that does require disposal in a class 1 kind of landfill. And at other waste energy plants in the country, there are roughly 77 of them still operating in the United States. They're implementing processes to take the metals out of the ash better, as well as use the ash as an aggregate because it's inert. Okay.
We're moving ahead of schedule, so if you'd like to keep going.
If everyone is okay, I think we're on 48 minutes. If everyone's okay, are we good keeping on going?
Let me ask a question. Looking at this where it says Metro Nashville is requesting RFPs for a solid waste master plan, which in essence that's what we're doing here, correct? And why, and then also acknowledging that I see the footnote on this page here where it talks about the Metro Davidson County's current contract with Republic Services Middle Point Landfill prevents it from entering into a new post-collection waste diversion methods until that contract ends. But looking at those things, I don't understand why, with this being a bigger issue as it is, it's a Middle Tennessee issue, and why are we here, and why is this not being looked at in a completely regional manner? And Mayor,
we had some discussion about this, and I guess the simple way to say this is we didn't know how we were going to coordinate with Davidson County. They're so much bigger than we are and doing so much more than we are. We didn't know how we would have a real significant voice in that whole process. And we were already further along than they are. They're several months behind us already in this discussion. So that may not be a good answer, but that's about what it amounts to. The complexity of making this work together, and maybe Harvey and them can help us a little bit more.
I'll just add that Metro was on a track to do planning before this activity track came out. And they are guided by a regional board, Davidson County Planning Board for solid waste also. So they've got people organized, talking, that have helped scope this request for proposal. So they were on a track. And then there was this track, and they started talking, but the tracks were, I think, so far down the road that right now they've got separate trains going on. That doesn't mean that as this train develops a vision, it couldn't go over to the other train and see if there's some way to work together. That's for you to decide, since you're the guiding, group. The jurisdictions are looking to you to say whether you think that's a good idea or not. But that's where things are.
And they've taken RFPs, right? I mean, as far
Not as yet.
Not as of yet?
Yeah, they take RFPs next week.
I think part of the consideration is that the city and the county, please don't let me speak for you if I say something out of tune, want to make sure that the city and county's interests are looked after, first and foremost. And that, Davidson County and Nashville have a much bigger waste need. They're actually one of the biggest user of the Middle Point landfill, so they're very much impacted by what's going on as well. They don't get free disposal, so they're not going to be impacted from that standpoint. But if they have to go somewhere else, it may change what they do. So, there's some interests that are aligned and some interests that may not be. And, I think that that's just a consideration, is to make sure that the city and the county and the communities and the people here and the businesses here have a plan that speaks to them. But I don't think that anything here, necessarily prevents you from having discussions with other regions or other communities. Part of the thought is that this may end up being a regional approach if the SWAC, wants to recommend such. There's clearly advantages from economies of scale. Certain technologies won't work at low scales. Certain technologies will. Transfer technologies, they can work at very low scales to a landfill. Let's say the more advanced technologies, the energy recovery technologies, some processing technologies, even some recycling technologies, need a certain economy of scale to make them economical and competitive on the market. Waste is a free market in many respects. There's nothing that governs, where it goes per se. It's considered commerce under the Constitution, and so they have freedom of commerce, and there's ways government can affect that, and we can talk about that if there's happens. But without some governmental interference, it's traded like a commodity. Yes, ma'am.
Just one question on slide 27, the third dot in the top section on Metro Nashville. It refers to the metro region. Is that just Davidson County, or is it broader than Davidson County?
It's just Davidson County.
Yep.
Nashville, city and metros, Nashville and Davidson County, its official name.
The RFP is actually issued on behalf of both of them. It's coming out, or that was coming out, and the proposal's coming in. It's actually issued on behalf of both the county and the city.
The board refers to itself as a regional board, but it's just a board from within the outer boundaries of Davidson County, is my understanding.
And this sort of is a point along these lines here. Rutherford County, if I sort of added up the numbers you gave us earlier, we're generating about 730,000 tons a year, I think is what I came up with. 2,000, is that correct?
No.
Just Rutherford County, not all this other thing.
Well, actually, that's the next slide. I'll be happy to pull it up. Oops.
Okay, look on slide number roughly 10. Between Murfreesboro and the city, we're generating 80,000. No,
that's
I meant to say everything that's coming in now is about.
That's what goes in the landfill. That's not what you generate.
Well, that's actually what the city and the county
into the landfill.
collect. So the county collects waste through its recycling centers. That's how the county collects waste. The city collects waste through its curbside operations. But there's more waste. There's homeowners that have waste that are outside, they don't bring it to. There's businesses that have waste that don't bring it to the recycling centers. So when you add that in, it's more than the 38 plus 42, which is 80,000 tons. So 80,000 tons is what the city and the county currently control through their operations. But as you'll see on the slide we'll get to, we think it's almost closer to 300,000 tons that you're currently disposing as a county. Now, one thing I'll say, though, is that, the county serves as a region. I should say not the county, the Middle Point landfill serves as a regional disposal facility. And I forget the number, if it's like 13 or 19 counties that actually, or communities that actually bring their waste to the landfill. It's quite a lot. Some in much smaller quantities than others, the biggest one being Davidson County, Metro Nashville. So 650,000, of the total amount of about almost 1 million tons that goes into that landfill comes from out of county, but the rest of it does come from within the county.
And how much do we know is being hauled by private haulers in our county, just within our
Everything but 80,000 tons. So we think that...
I'm talking about just for Rutherford County residents.
Say the question again, I'm sorry.
Okay. Murfreesboro and Rutherford County, 80,000 tons per year.
Right.
That's how much we know we're taking from our recycling centers and how much they're picking up trash-wise, right?
Correct. Yep.
There's 650,000 more tons coming from somewhere else. The other 19 counties.
Actually, it's more than that. That's just coming from out of county. That 690,000 tons is out of county.
Okay.
That's from all the other counties that surround Rutherford County.
I understand
We
that's out
think
of
that there's
county.
300,000 tons of waste going into the middle, that are just disposed of in the county, or I should say generated within Rutherford County. So of that, 80,000 comes from what you control through your operations. A little over 200,000 is stuff that's outside your control.
That's what I was getting at. It's a little bit more than 200,000 more that's being hauled by private haulers, basically.
That's correct.
Within the county.
You don't control that. Now, when we talk about options, do you want to control that? Those are options that the county can do. There are other counties, and we'll show some examples of other counties who have, for example, decided to, on their unincorporated areas, to manage that waste. And these are policy decisions that, are yours to make. You can either.
Percentage-wise, the collective municipalities in unincorporated area of the county, or the county, we're 20% of the amount that's brought into Middle Point. If you figure we're.
That's about, I think it's less than that.
Well, I'm saying if you figure the portion that we have control of and the portion that we don't have control of.
Right.
Is that?
So let's say you've got control of a little less than 10%, and about, say, close to 25, 30% is outside of your control that comes from the county into the landfill, roughly. These are rough numbers.
Okay. The point I was going to make a little bit there, 300,000 tons it's from within the counties, from
That's
various
correct.
sources, controlled
Yes,
and
that's correct.
uncontrolled. 1,000 tons a day. And Lebanon has a pilot project for up to 64 tons a day. So we're looking at, is that about right?
That's right.
So whatever we're talking about here is going to take something much, much bigger, almost 20 times bigger than what they've got just to take care of the internal stuff here.
Well, it depends on, again, what you want to take care of.
That's right.
If you want to take care of what you're currently managing, you're managing 80,000 tons a year. If you want to take care of what the county generates, you're talking 300,000 tons a year. From some economies of scale, that's even on the smaller side. Let's say we talk about waste energy, which we don't, we're not saying that that's a positive or not. I know that that's something that's a potential option. That would be on the smaller side of a waste energy facility. So even then, you may be looking at more of a regional approach to make that economy of scale work.
Okay, so, and you guys are familiar with what's happening in West Palm, but what I was getting at a little bit here is this. If we include all these other counties, including Davidson County, you can see how many more. It's going to make us even 10 times bigger than what we are, just from within.
Right. There's a lot to think about.
A lot.
There's a lot to think about as to how much you want to take on, who you want to partner with. When you partner with someone like that, it's a long-term marriage. You got to make sure that that's the right person you want to walk down the aisle with.
We get to billions of dollars instead of hundreds of millions.
That's correct. And we'll actually present some information about the Palm Beach facility. And when we go through examples, we're going to show some examples how some other communities have gone through and implemented systems, both from a rural standpoint, from a growing standpoint, which you are, and from a more sophisticated, advanced standpoint, so you get a sense for what people have done at different scales.
Let me add one more thing to that number. That total trash number in the county is what's going into Middle Point. You've got other private haulers that operate in Rutherford County that haul it outside of the county. So that 300,000 tons is not all the trash generated within the county. That's just what went to.
Okay.
When do we all project what would be done 8 years from now? We're looking at the population increase. How much?
Let's bring up the slide so everyone can see it here. Here's part of the projection here. Now, we've done this for a 20-year period, roughly. And so 10 years down the road, we're looking at from 300 to 375,000. 20 years down the road, we're up to almost 500,000 tons, in the county. This is county-generated solid waste. And now, you're right, Mac's right, that we're going on what's reported. And a lot of, some of the things we may want to talk about from a policy standpoint is reporting and how you get information and make this data-driven decisions. Right now, we're relying on the state from a reporting standpoint to give the county information as to what kind of waste is generated in the county. But, looking at some of the growth rates that we have seen, I think we were looking at about 2.3% increases in population growth, looking at about a fairly consistent amount from a per capita standpoint. This is the growth curve you're looking at over the next 20 years.
This doesn't take into account the waste reduction generation rates the state has put out as goals. This is current.
That's right. This
This
assumes
is very important to remember.
Right.
This is current. We're, I guess, not bullish on seeing the waste stream generation rate go down like the state's projecting. That's very, very big reductions.
From a historical standpoint, to give you a sense, in this country, from like 1960 to 1990, there was a huge uptick in growth on a per-person basis in this country on waste. Grew up to around 4 pounds per person per day, roughly. Do you know what the number is offhand? 4.4, almost 5. From 1990, when a lot of people have implemented education programs, recycling programs, composting programs, programs to do that, it leveled off the amount that the people generated. But since population was going up, the amount of waste kept going up in this country. So there's been a lot of emphasis and a lot of attention tried to reduce waste on, from a homeowner standpoint, from a business standpoint. And while some programs are successful in that, as a nation, we have not seen, let's say, noticeable decreases in solid waste generation on a per person basis. And in fact, because population is going up, waste generation continues to go up in the country. So this is maybe a conservative estimate. I mean, who knows? I wish I had a crystal ball to tell me what's going to happen here in 20 years. But these are fairly standard from a standpoint of our planning projections. And, true that we'll talk about priorities and policies that talk about waste reduction and reuse as a top priority. But from the standpoint of planning for your future, if history repeats itself, those efforts will stem the tide of growth. They may not necessarily result in a significant waste stream where you don't have to provide for the disposal. So any questions on this graph? I mean, this sort of provides some ideas on where we're looking at. Yes.
Just a follow-up question, if I may. We're looking at these rates, and obviously we've got the issue with an absolute capacity issue. We're looking at 8 years out, 4 years out, that type of thing. So we have an absolute capacity number that for the county and city would turn us from a net importer with the host benefits to a net exporter. And you had a slide earlier that we're looking at $55, roughly $55 a ton, and you said it was a market. Where did you envision the destination would be? What is the market in the region if we become a net exporter?
Landfills are, regional landfills around the area are your markets. I think we did a map that showed the landfills within 100 miles that have capacity, and we'll show that at another time when we really get into capacities, looking at different options. If you want to look at transfer and disposal outside the county, we can show you where they are, how much capacity is left on them. We know generally what rates they are, how much it's going to cost you to get it there. You have to put it in a bigger truck to get it there. So that's part of a system that is, we'll call it a transfer and disposal out of county system, which is on the simpler side, can be done at a scale of 80,000 tons a day or a year. So those are some options that we can look at, but that's just looking at the region in general.
Okay. All
I
right.
just had a comment about population. I just happened to be looking at the latest estimates from the Center for Business and Economic Research at UT for 2035. They actually have a figure that's almost 20,000 higher than the figure we have on this chart.
Okay.
And historically, every time they revise their projections, the projection for Rutherford County is higher than it was the last time.
Right.
So that is actually up from the one that they had projected for. An example, the first projection that they did for 2020, for instance, for Rutherford County was 264,000, and the current projection for 2020 is 350,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, clearly, we can work with you all to refine some of these numbers. This was just a first glance to give you a sense of the scale of the issue we're looking at. But, I mean, yeah, you're a very fast-growing county. Who knows how fast you will grow? The projections are you're going to be the fastest-growing county in Tennessee. And, you know, again, if we can nail it in terms of, predicting how much growth there will be, that'll be it. But we do want to come together and get consensus on what we're thinking about from a growth perspective. All right, so the next slide I'm going to show you is just, what is garbage? What is MSW? And by the way, I know we threw some acronyms out at you that we didn't explain. So MSW was one acronym that was out there. That's Municipal Solid Waste. It's a common phrase we use for household garbage. It usually extends to small business garbage, commercial waste as well. Fits into the municipal solid waste. It's putrescible, means it'll decompose. And WTE is waste to energy. Again, another acronym. We use that to define facilities that typically create energy from waste, oftentimes through combustion. All right, so waste has changed over the last 20 years. This was in the 2015 plan from TDEC, and this was done on a study that was done in 2008. So things have changed a little bit since then. But these numbers are roughly even. The biggest waste stream percentage, as you can see in this, from a big major category, is paper. It used to be more. We used to have more newspaper. We are gone to, obviously, less newspaper. But we live in the era of Amazon Prime. So boxes, cardboard boxes, we call it corrugated, have actually continued to remain very strong. And actually the markets for that is recyclable commodity very strong, but that paper quantity has not decreased out there. And in paper, whether it be, waste cartons from cereal boxes or detergent boxes, things of that nature, all of that fall into the category of paper. The second largest component out there is organics. And organics typically comprise food waste and yard waste. Those are the two major components of organics. Both of those, especially food waste, has risen over the last 20 years in terms of its percentage in the waste stream. There's been a lot of talk to reduce waste, reduce food, losses, but we do consume a lot of food materials, whether it be, and this includes, commercial waste, supermarkets that get rid of waste as well. But residents throw out a lot of waste, a lot of food waste. And yard waste is, brush, leaves, grass clippings, et cetera, that are collected. And so this is, that comprises a significant percent, and that percentage continues to be high. It's often targeted, one of the big, components that are targeted for diversion. And, we will be happy to explore diversion opportunities for food waste and or other organics. And besides that, plastics are a big component and a growing component of solid waste. And plastics is not just plastics. There's all kinds of plastics. There's number ones, there's up through sevens, and then there's composites, and who knows? There's different things. There's molded plastics and injected plastics and film plastics. So we've become a plastics society. Some of that is recoverable. If you call HDPE, which is high-density polyethylene, and PET, polyethylene terephthalate, that's your milk jugs and your soda bottles. That's your standards, your detergent bottles. But we've gone to looking at trying to collect other things, such as rigid plastics, whether they be lawn chairs or some toys, things of that nature that may have a market. And some of those markets are not as good from an economic standpoint as your regular plastics, but plastics is a growing commodity in the waste stream. Is this you or is this me still? All right. Okay.
So John was talking about things that have changed in the waste stream, and when you talk about these things, it's sort of an aha moment, or of course it is moment, but there are products in the waste stream that didn't exist 10 years ago, and there are products that were in the waste stream that we counted on for recycling, for example, that aren't really there anymore. John talked about paper. Paper used to be the bread and butter of recycling, but it's shrinking all the time and transforming and changing all the time. The rise of electronic devices to replace many of those things is a key component of that. And also, an electronic device is an example of a thing that is highly recoverable if you can get all the pieces and parts of it separated from one another. We've also got increasing different kinds of shapes and types of plastic in our waste stream that we didn't have before, or in different shapes and sizes than we didn't have before. And the machinery that recovers those things looks for a shape and size. So it's having to adapt constantly to identify those materials. When someone says, is this recyclable? The answer is probably but. Probably but. Can you recover it? And organic waste is an increasing source of concern among residents and businesses and governments and communities. It is highly, highly recoverable. It is highly, highly preventable. Our attitudes and our approaches towards food that we generate as waste and food that we need to recover and process are evolving and changing. And there are a lot of technologies and options to consider about that. And I talked a little bit about how paper has decreased, also decreasing glass containers. They used to be very common for many types of products. They are decreasing but becoming more common in other types of products. So they are, again, evolving and changing. Glass is something people really want to recycle from a customer-facing standpoint, but it can be very difficult to market. So these are the type of things that we'll be talking about and looking at as we work on your plan for the future. Future services, speaking of, they need to be matched to what we can know has changed from your last go-round and what we can predict and project for the future go-round. We know that we're going to need, I talked about evolving and changing solutions for recovering materials from the waste stream. Do we need to keep just recovering them source separated by the customer, or do you need to pursue some different options? For example, you see in the blue box, mixed waste processing. That's the idea of recovering more or additional materials from what's garbage or would have gone to your landfill. Well, now your landfill isn't so close. So maybe you need to be squeezing some more value out of that material before it goes to its ultimate destination. Some of these technologies are on the cutting edge. Some of them are well-known and widely used. Harvey talked about the waste energy plants. When we were talking about your regional market, by the way, you're on the edge of hauling distance to Huntsville, where there's a large waste-to-energy plant. So your options are varied in this region, and we have a lot to consider and think about what's going to be best for all your residents.
I'd like to offer you all a break at this point. If you'd like to take a 10-minute break, it's up to you. We'll be going for another hour and 15 minutes. So,
okay.
What's your pleasure?
Perfect.
All right. And I understand that there are refreshments in the refrigerators on the side. You know, drinks if you're interested.
I'll start. So
We'll start again at 7:25. We're a little ahead of schedule, so that allows a little more time at the end if we want to have more discussion. So just let you know where we're at. So we're moving along fine. The next section we want to talk about are approaches. Approaches from the standpoint of policy, standpoint of management techniques, as well as technology. And we sort of wanted to start with, you know, for those unfamiliar with, we'll call it the waste management hierarchy. This is something well established within our field. These are from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, but again, they sort of do reflect what's typically considered the policies that are generally most preferred. Most preferred being at the top. So these used to be a normal pyramid, and then they realized that at the top, it didn't show the magnitude of what that policy consideration should be. So they've actually inverted the pyramids. On the left-hand side of the screen is on the right-hand, so we'll start with the right-hand side of the screen is your waste management hierarchy. At the top of that hierarchy is to not produce waste, is to reduce the amount of waste. And that can be done through purchasing habits, that can be done through manufacturing, bringing your own bag to the grocery store, reusing, containers at your house, reusing boxes, whatever it may be, going to the thrift store. That's reuse and reduce. After reduce and reuse, typically people look at recycling and composting of materials as the next best thing to do with waste. And that's source separation, typically. And when we say source separation, that means we recover it before it goes into the waste. It never hits a trash can. It's recovered by the homeowner. They put it in a separate container. They put their compostable materials in their backyard composter, or they send it to some regional facility. If you do brush, it's taking the brush out, putting it to a brush facility. That is source separation. And recycling and composting are considered, next on the hierarchy. After that is energy recovery. And energy recovery is often associated with things like technology, such as waste energy, mass burn waste energy, pyrolysis, gasification, refuse-derived fuel. There's a lot of different things that can be done to look at energy recovery from waste. Even landfill gas to energy is somewhat considered, but at the bottom of this is treatment and disposal. Under no scenario do we see will you be landfill free. You will hear people talk about zero waste. We think that's a fine concept. That's the ideal. If we can get to zero waste. Many people talk about zero waste to landfill as a concept. So trying to get everything above the bottom little triangle and trying to get as much as you can into those buckets. And you'll see, there's examples in Europe where they can get very close, 90% maybe, 75%. But you'll never get 100%. It's just we have too many materials in our waste stream that cannot be either recycled, reused, reduced, composted. And so I think we want to just caution. We think it's important to realize that as we look at policies, this is generally a sign of most preferred to least preferred, and a way that we would at least put out there for discussion as a standpoint view. With all of the emphasis, as we mentioned before, in the waste stream, the food waste is still actually a growing piece of the waste stream. The EPA recently came out with their food waste hierarchy. So the top one is to stop wasting food. Stop throwing away. Don't buy more than you need. Eat your leftovers. Make some creative soups. Then after that is to feed people. So food sharing, food banks, things of that nature that can use, restaurants that donate their food, things of that nature. After that is feeding animals, et cetera, down to, again, disposing of food. So there is the emphasis, again, looking at highest and best uses. As we look through policy decisions and planning, these are things just to keep in mind. Now to just throw a whole lot of stuff at you. This is a decision tree, if you will, and options of things that can happen after you do source separation. And we like to do, in our world, we look at a lot of flow diagrams. We like to see how materials and energy and money flows throughout systems. So at the top, you have the inputs to that. So you actually have three on the left-hand side. MSW, as we mentioned before, municipal solid waste, organics, which is in food waste and yard waste. And then down below, we actually break out food scraps as a separate material. And this shows you all the different things you can do to it. The MSW can go to a processing facility where you get recyclables. You can actually screen out organics. You can create energy. You can, these are post-recycling, so we don't want to assume that, there's not recycling in here. This is after recycling and composting. Try to deal with the rest of this. And on the right-hand side, gets you to what these things create. From a waste energy facility, you create, if there are boilers involved, you create steam. You create electricity if there are, turbines that take that steam and run, you'll create electricity. The RDF, the refuse-derived fuel, or process, we use that term, refuse-derived fuel. It's fuel created from refuse-derived. That can be used as a fuel for a variety of facilities. In here that's not listed, but should be, is cement kilns. They currently use a lot of different fuel sources, including tires, in their processes. There is waste that can be used for that. as well as dedicated combustion units that can make that happen. On the food side, recycling food scraps can be combined with other things. It can be combined at your wastewater treatment plants to create it put into digesters, which use anaerobic bacteria to create biogas and break down the organics. That can create compost in the end, soil amendments, as well as gas. But as you see, all of these things will have those gray boxes, residue and landfill. So we want to just, say that there's no scenario that we're going to present to you that we try to, as Harvey likes to say it, we try to tell it like it is. You'll hear us talk straight, these are what we think can be realistically done. From this standpoint, we want to talk about the fact that you start with policy. And, here you're going to first probably consider things like policy as what you want to do. And eventually these policies will be brought back to your governing bodies who establish policies for your communities, whether they be the counties or the municipalities. Some of the policy decisions that you can do involve, what kind of influence do you want to have on the waste stream? You may have heard the term flow control. When I mentioned to you that you have 300,000 tons, you're controlling 80 right now, flow control could give you the ability to take that 300 and manage it. Would it be done by ordinance? It would have to be done very carefully, in careful consideration of the law, to make sure that it's constitutionally done. But the recent Supreme Court decisions have said that if you are a publicly owned facility, you can direct waste to your facility. That's in the public good. It sort of balances out, the commerce with the public good that comes from managing solid waste. We're not saying that that's what we recommend. We're saying that that's a policy decision as to how much you want to exercise your control over the waste that's out there. Likely to, what type of service level do you want to have as a policy to your residents and businesses? Right now, private haulers like All in One provide a curbside recycling service. They do it if people want it. The county, except for the city of Murfreesboro, does not provide curbside collection of waste. I don't think there is curbside collection of recyclables by any municipality or county in the county. So are these things that you are looking for, is that a service that you think is important? Many communities, and we'll show you some that as examples that have taken that as a policy decision and have offered that up. Franchising is a way to also manage competition within a county. So counties can say close the market, contract the market out for solid waste. They could do it by groups, divisions, you could break it into regions and control it that way. And then you issue contracts, but the county ends up being an entity, and then haulers come in and they will bid on the right to serve. If it's franchising, the hauler will invoice the customer directly. If it is contract collection, the county would be the invoicing entity. So there's different ways to do that. Some of the reasons people do that, again, is to take control and to be able to manage waste in a more comprehensive manner. Franchising also sometimes generates revenue for governments. They put on a fee. It's called a franchise fee. And they take a percentage of the gross revenues to help fund other solid waste programs. Again, we're not advocating any positions at this point. We're just sort of throwing out there, these are type of policy decisions that are out there. From your policies come, what do you do? What are the programs you are going to implement? How do they affect recycling? What type of education is needed to manage your waste stream? What type of programs do you need to do to clean your waste stream? We have HHW, HCW. Those stand for household hazardous waste or household chemical waste. They're acronyms used to define things like, first of all, residential waste from the homeowners is exempt from any hazardous waste laws. The homeowner can pretty much throw out anything they want, into the garbage. It's kind of weird, but that's the way the law is written. So communities oftentimes will provide a household chemical waste service to make sure that the pesticides, the herbicides, the flammable liquids, mercury, any other toxins out there have a safe place to go so it doesn't end up in a disposal facility. And these are the type of programs that come out of that. And from there, you have to figure out what technology is going to be used to influence or to implement the policies and the programs that you've established. For example, are you going to put some type of conversion technologies in there? If you are going to create, mixed waste processing, are you going to create fuel and find fuel markets? If you have a landfill, are you going to do landfill gas generation? So these are type of things that come about from that decision. We're going to go through some examples of other communities that we have worked for. All of these are either clients or past clients of GBB, and we've provided advice and guidance to them. Madera County is a county in California. It's a rural county in the Central Valley, about 155,000 people, and they have a county staff of I think 2 or 3 that manage the services in the county, and it's all privately contracted out, but they have franchised the unincorporated county areas in the county. So most of the county lives in unincorporated areas. There's 2 cities within the county, and they have basically contracted that out. They've issued RFPs. Haulers propose on that through a competitive process. The services are defined in that, and actually the services recently defined are curbside recycling of single stream recyclables, so that's all your containers and papers all in one bin, as well as garbage collection. They provide revenues to the county. About 6% of their gross revenues go to the county to help fund the other operations that they do. They provide services to both residential and commercial businesses. The market is basically closed to any other hauler to provide garbage services except for this county. They do provide waste disposal through a landfill. They have their own landfill. They run it. They own it. It's about 600 tons a day. It's got life for about another 40 years. And they do have a household hazardous waste program. They do outreach and education. Their tip fee, just to give you a sense, is in the say upper 30s, low 40s as to what they're charging at their landfill for their services. And they do use technology. They do use a landfill. They are using materials recovery facilities. We call them MRFs. Again, another acronym, Materials Recovery Facility. And they do have some composting operations going forward. And Kate will talk about Muskegon County.
So Muskegon is another example of one of our clients that is mostly rural county, and there are a few incorporated municipalities. The policy is that the municipalities contract for collection, and the townships, which this is in the broader sort of colonial use of the word township. It's not a town. It's a broader kind of area, more like a district. So the townships operate drop-off centers where people can bring their garbage, and some of them also take recyclables. And then the cities, the municipalities, they contract out all their residents for collection. That's the policy. The programs that are used to implement these policies are, they have a county landfill that is operated for the purpose largely of serving their own people and the businesses that collect from their own people. They do take out of county waste, but they're really focused on serving their own people. And then the drop-off centers, that's the other technology. So the policy is to provide service in these ways. And they also have a few other places where you can bring some other materials, some scrap metal, some appliances, things like that. So that's the example of their policy, the programs they use, and the technologies they use to implement those programs. Harvey's going to come talk about a rapid growth example for you, Mecklenburg County, North Carolina.
So Mecklenburg is a pretty fast-growing county. The city of Charlotte is the predominant city there. The county has a population of about 1 million, and the city within that is over 800,000 people. The city has its own collection crews and trucks that go around and provide a pretty comprehensive service for waste collection, single-stream recyclables, as well as yard waste, and take it to the county-provided system. The city doesn't have any processing equipment or disposal facilities. The county provides that. It provides a composting yard. It provides a contract with a private company for a landfill. And in fact, that landfill contract is ending, so they're starting to go through where do we take our waste and what should we do in the future. The county owns a MRF, a materials recycling facility, where the single stream source separated recyclables go, and they have a contract operator for that MRF. It was built a number of years ago, and it was a pretty state-of-the-art system that they're having some difficulties with because it needs to be upgraded for the change in single stream materials that it's getting. Their recycling rate is about 35% in Charlotte, in Mecklenburg County. The county doesn't provide collection services for the people in the unincorporated area. They're on a subscription basis, and all the commercial is on a subscription basis also, an open market basis where people can, commercial businesses, large multifamily properties call up and contract for service. Again, the city does provide some multifamily for the smaller properties. They have recently, under a private development, had a private company take a brownfield site and reinvent it into a environmental park where they're implementing anaerobic digestion, inviting industries that can convert recyclables to products, and trying to create a local, regional, circular economy. So they're doing some very interesting things there. In Lee County, which is Fort Myers, I'm a Red Sox fan, so I really like Lee County because the Red Sox train there in the winter. But besides that, this is an unbelievably fast-growing county. It reminds us of you all in terms of how fast it's growing. Now, in Florida, the state required counties to start doing some planning for disposal because the groundwater in Florida is like 6 inches from the top. I mean, you dig down with your hands and there's water. It's real close. So they didn't want municipal landfills, so they really got aggressive with planning systems back in the late 70s, late 1970s. So you'll see in Florida a lot of counties that have what we call an integrated, a fully integrated waste management system with a lot of recycling and a lot of processing, waste energy plants, as well as landfills as part of the county system. Well, Lee County implemented some very, very good facilities and services. They franchise collection for all the unincorporated areas of the county. There's about 700,000 people in the county. There's a number of cities that provide for their own collection, and they have interlocal agreements with those cities to contract with the county to enter their system for processing services for recycling and yard waste, mulch, they call it hort, and there's a lot of palm fronds that fall on the ground that they have to process year-round. They also handle biosolids in their system. They built a waste energy plant years ago and had to expand it. A plant like thermal, different vendor and technology in the plant. Plant's working great. Its performance factor is about 95% availability, which is a very high rate. Makes power that it sells to the grid. Because of the growth that's anticipated, we're planning right now other infrastructure as well as changes to their recycling services to get them above the 35% recycling they're doing. Now, of all the waste that they generate today, about zero waste, unprocessed waste, goes to landfill. The only materials that go to landfill are the ash and residue from the waste energy plant. And they process and recover almost everything. And they have composting as well. They also have a household hazardous waste center that's open, I think it's 7 days a week, John? 6 days a week, where people can drive up and drop off electronics and any kind of chemicals, batteries that they have, so that they don't go into the system. And it's like a drive-up thing, and some people meet you, take the materials, and they properly manage them, recycle some, and dispose of some in household chemical hazardous waste facilities. If I can get that one. Next slide. Now, Palm Beach County is a very fast-growing area also. And they built a similar system like Lee County has, but they were growing so fast that they were landfilling a lot of municipal solid waste. And they decided to build a second waste-to-energy facility to both get them to zero waste to landfill. That's where no unprocessed waste goes to landfill, as well as provide for the future growth. So they built a 3,000 ton per day mass burn waste energy plant that started up in June 2015. The cost of that plant was over $600 million, and it produces electricity. It's built on the same site as their entire complex is on. This is a county that's pretty large, goes north and south on the east coast of Florida, and they have a few transfer stations that feed that system that's located on the west central side of the county. Very, very expansive. They also caused a franchise collection system for their residents to be implemented. They hire contractors to go and collect the waste, collect the yard waste, collect the dual stream recyclables. Dual stream means that you have a stream with containers only and then a stream with paper only. So they have two streams. Now the more common practice is single stream, where you put the paper in containers in a large cart and collect it, and then you separate them all together. But they're still using the dual stream. Their first waste energy facility was one that processed the waste first, made refuse-derived fuel, pulled out the metals, and combusted the rest in a dedicated boiler, the same kind of boiler like a semi-suspension boiler that's used in electric utilities for coal firing or used in sugar mills to burn bagasse during the sugar making process. Very successful system operating very reliably for the communities. These communities in Florida have household rates that are in the $30 to $35 per household per month range. Okay, and you know, because they've provided a system for all the residents, they've achieved some very good economies of scale at the tonnages that they're responsible for managing. Florida is an excellent example of where counties have been given the responsibility through state law to provide for a system to support the collection of the materials and meet also some very aggressive state goals, recycling goals, and landfill diversion goals. Okay. All right. Before we go to public outreach, let me just ask if there's any questions about that aspect of our presentation before we change subjects.
In looking at this one in particular, the two Florida, the waste to energy, do you know the energy generated?
Yes. A ton of garbage roughly generates about 600 kilowatt hours per ton net for sale. The older the technology, a little less, maybe down to 500. The newer technology, I think the guarantee might be about 650 kilowatt hours per ton from a waste energy facility.
Is there a specific makeup of that waste stream that it has to be?
The BTU value of the waste post-source separation is about 5,000 to 5,200 BTUs per pound. If you didn't do the source separation, you might be 4,500 BTUs per pound, but by taking out the metals and the paper, you know, the BTU value goes up. Now, if a program implements organic services, goes after the food waste, the waste gets hotter. So what happens there? You can only put in less tons into that same combustion system because it's limited really by BTUs, not by tons. It's limited by the amount of BTUs that can go in it. That's a good question.
Do you know whether or not Florida Power and Light, is this considered a green energy?
A renewable energy source. I think it is in Florida, but the value of power has decreased significantly, not just in Florida, but all across the country, because we have an abundance of natural gas.
Right.
So it's, even though these are renewable energy, they're not as the value is less. We've got so much solar coming on and wind as well. There's less demand for renewable energy from solid waste. Not all states classify solid waste energy as renewable. That's a state-by-state decision. The federal government does refer to solid waste energy as renewable for the portion of the waste that's biogenic, that came from renewable sources, which is about, Department of Energy says that's about 65% of the waste stream is biogenic and would classify as renewable. So if that facility in a state that's called renewable, where it calls renewable, and you go to get renewable energy credits, you would only do it for that portion of the power that comes out. They're not worth that much anyway, yet, but hopefully they'll be worth more someday, or we'll value them more someday. Other questions? Okay. Right there.
Thank you. As we near the end, I'm going to spend a minute talking about community education and outreach. Thank you, John. And I think it goes without saying that communication is absolutely essential with a process this complex that involves so many folks across the county, across the various communities, and possibly across the region. And I dare say that communication is all the more important when we start talking about the economics and the ability and the will to pay for a process like this. But before I get into too many specifics, I want to indulge you in just a very quick and light story, since we've been through quite a bit of conversation that didn't have a lot of humor to it. I can remember when I entered government back in 1991, kind of wet behind the ears and working with Metro Council, 40 members of Metro Council, and we're trying to pass our first budget, and it's a big day and a big deal, and there was some controversy over an issue involving a subsidy to the symphony orchestra. And so the debate went back and forth over a $2 million subsidy, and it was getting pretty heated, and suddenly up on the second row, a councilman's shoulders about this big, and he stood about this high, took a microphone, and he waved it. He said, "Mr. Vice Mayor." The Vice Mayor punched his button. He said, "You're recognized, Councilman Tabasco." And he said, "I just want to say one thing." He said, "I'm against this $2 million to the symphony." He said, "The people over in my district in East Nashville, if they want to hear symphony music, they go to the funeral home." Well, that was just a clear case of miscommunication. We want to avoid miscommunication in this arena. Wrong way. Excuse me. There we go. We plan to, the communication, as I said earlier, is very much a two-way street. And we have a wide range of constituencies that have to be touched, as you all experience every day. We have suburbia with Rutherford County, but we also have rural Rutherford County. We have commuters in Rutherford County who really spend very little of their time trying to understand what's happening in their community, because they may be working in Nashville or in Williamson County. You have an MTSU large constituency, so when you sort of put this in a ball, it becomes a pretty complex communication exercise. But the one thing that we have to do is we have to be clear and simple with our messaging. And the first step in this is just a basic education process to discuss what exists now, why it exists now, what happens to waste in Rutherford County, and where it goes, who pays for it. And these are sort of very simple components of waste that I think we all take for granted, because waste is out of sight, out of mind for most of us. And I dare say that many of your constituents have given much thought to how it's paid for, or whether they're actually paying for it. So on our staff, we have a media specialist who will be working with the conventional media every day to determine kind of new angles to tell this story and help educate the general public. We also have a community engagement specialist who, that job is all about reaching out to the community in the various neighborhoods. We've identified 50,000 members, are members of Facebook and listserv groups that we'll be reaching out to. We'll be doing various community meetings, as has been mentioned, and trying to put a solid, consistent message and voice and face to this exercise. The community organizing, as we said, there will be public meetings, there will be online public meetings, and we also will be reaching out to community leaders in each of the constituencies that I described, each of the municipalities and sort of large constituencies around the county, like MTSU. All this said, we will obviously be communicating on the front end of the process, but also throughout the process as to what issues are being considered, what facts and figures are put on the table, and seeking public input on the two-way street. And lastly, communicating the ultimate recommendations and steps forward that the county should determine. As we step through this public process, though, I would encourage all of you to not hesitate to reach out to us if we're missing constituencies, or if we're missing certain points that you feel like aren't penetrating into the general public. You know, people are barraged with just a massive amount of information right now, or in this day and time, and so we can't take for granted that they hear our message. So if there are no questions on the communication piece, we'll move to the proposed schedule. I think slides are overrated, Harvey. Yeah, we talked about the public meetings.
Just to be clear, this is your messaging. This is about the process. So we're proposing to, in our scope, includes the ability to help you reach out to the community with what's going on, you know, and we're here to help, you know, craft a message that you want us to craft. We think it's important to make sure the public is aware, especially if there's any changes coming down. First of all, we know there's going to be some change down the line. When the landfill, you know, reaches capacity, change is going to happen. So we're planning for that change. We're trying to communicate that. All right. In our proposal, I think we had about an 11-month time frame to do the work. We were actually hired a few months ago, so we're a little behind in terms of getting the council together, and but we're pleased to be here. If you go through our scope, and we recommend you do so, you'll see we have proposed 3 workshops, and in these workshops, we're going to progressively try to get to, you know, these policies, these programs, and sort of your recommendations on technology going forward. And that's what we hope to do, is to, you know, provide you the information, answer your questions. I don't think we're not gonna accomplish this all through workshops, by the way. We're gonna need to have other types of communication, whether it be, you know, conference calls, Some type of, maybe it's, whether you have subcommittees or working groups or whatever you're talking about that may want to look at certain issues. But we want to be able to have you, at the end of this process, be able to come back with some recommendations as to how you see the county moving forward with solid waste management. As we mentioned about the public input process and involvement process, the idea is to ensure that the public is aware of what's going on. Obviously, we're televised here, and that's part of the issue, and this is a public meeting, and people are invited. So to listen and to hear what's going on. At some point, I think you will look to get outreach from the community and actually ask their opinion on things. I think that's your call as to how you do that. These aren't necessarily public meetings from the standpoint of, getting input to the process. We think this is your process. Again, that's your call how you do things. But we do think that there's that involvement piece to make sure that, things are not being done in a vacuum. The public is aware of what's going on. We try to reach as much public as possible. We're hoping to develop what we call a draft strategic plan, and that's for the county and the communities that are in here. And that is a plan that will hopefully be whatever your time period is, 20 years, 30 years, whatever time horizon. I think we're looking at least 20 years from a planning perspective. That plan needs to go through a review process, probably back to your elected officials, to the public. You then want to finalize that plan and then implement that plan. So these are the steps that are going to be involved in this, and this is not an easy thing. It's just a 4-step process. There's many things that have to get to the point of making decisions on this. Again, in terms of the vision for the workshops, this workshop was to try to get you going, try to get you some basic information about planning, about where the county's at, what kind of infrastructure you have, what some other communities have done in terms of infrastructure, what your time frame is, what kind of waste volumes you're looking at. Some of these things we will refine, including population projections as we go forward, to try to redefine that. It's also looking at trying to set you up for the next decision processes. Workshop 2 was envisioned to talk about really who's in, who's out, from the standpoint of a system and how you are going to organize that system. For example, right now it's the city of Murfreesboro and the county of Rutherford that have come together to begin a planning process. There's no organization necessarily that's formally can implement that because they're two independent bodies. This SWAC that's been established here is an advisory body. It's a steering committee. It's there to advise the elected officials, but it has no implementation power. So one of the thoughts was, should there be an authority created? So authorities get created under state law to implement things usually, whether they be wastewater treatment plants or some type of environmental infrastructure, especially if it's done over multiple jurisdictions. To have a body that has empowered to make decisions, to implement things, to create rates and revenue structures independent of the two bodies. Maybe the two bodies have appointment powers. It's things like that that we will need to talk about as to how you want to implement. We're also going to look to find out what you want analyzed, whether it be different recycling options, different technology options, different management methods. We've talked about, the region of landfills. There's a lot of landfills out there. Well, how many are there? Where are they? What kind of capacity? What would it take to get there? These are the type of analysis that we can provide to you. It's really what analysis you need. I don't think we need to hear a lot back from you before the next workshop to know what questions you want answered. We have proposed some things on our scope of work that you'll see as to what we think, might be helpful from a decision-making standpoint, but really what's going to help you in providing guidance for that. Then workshop 3 is to really try to hone down further to come to the scenarios. And what we're looking to do is maybe create a couple scenarios. So maybe there's a landfill scenario, maybe there's a high recycling scenario, maybe there's an energy scenario. These are up to you to decide. We can evaluate each one of them on performance, on cost, things of that nature. So you have some numbers before you, so you can look at, cost impacts, recovery impacts, policy impacts, what kind of, things what demands you're going to put on your communities. from the standpoint of, require them to do certain things. And the focus is that after that, you have a framework for hopefully making a decision, you have a path going forward, and we're calling that a strategic plan. And that's what we hope to sort of come out of Workshop 3 with guidance as to how to craft that strategic plan. We can then write it, if you will, put it into a formal document. And here is our proposed schedule that we've started. This is sort of looking forward from here. We've been engaged for a few months now, working with the working group of the city and the county to understand and really actually get this group formed. I think has been our charge here is to really help to craft what we're trying to accomplish with this group. We're proposing, the workshops take place over the next 4-5 months and get us through, say, April, where we have our workshops. From there, if you want, we can have, take that information, that draft, concepts, get feedback on them, put them out there in the public, maybe, float them before some community groups, put them out online if you want to have some polls, whatever type of things you're looking for. And then from there, we want to try to craft all that messaging into a strategic plan, have it drafted, have it finalized, and then have it obviously back to your elected bodies that will make decisions on this. And as we mentioned, again, we do emphasize the public involvement piece of this. These are different mechanisms, and Dave did go through them with you. I'm not going to reiterate them, but throughout the process of developing the strategic plan, there's input, there's the ability for the public to get involved in the process, and these are some tools that we think can be used by the SWAC to gain an understanding of what the public thinks of the type of things you're looking at. And from here, we've got about 20 minutes before the time allotment that we've given to this process, and we'd like to really have a discussion at this point as to one, if there's questions that we need to get answered, two, if there's ideas on how to move this forward to a decision-making process, and things of that nature. So, Mayor.
I have 3 or 4 things that don't necessarily relate, but going back to the community education and outreach, and I've sort of revisited and looked at what the language we haven't acted upon, or we said we're not going to tonight on this solid waste advisory committee. The provision, it has a sentence in there that says provision shall be made for public comment at each meeting. And I assume we're talking about these workshops. So we've had one workshop. This is workshop number 1.
That's correct.
I mean, I think it might be a good idea at workshop number 2 and 3 that we agree at least that we set aside maybe a small amount of time, maybe 30 minutes, and give whoever comes, we've got a nice group of folks here, and they at least have some serious interest in this matter, and give them 30 minutes and give them maybe each 3 minutes of time to just tell us what they want to tell us. Now, I don't know, you've got other community neighborhood meetings and community service organizations and several things, but if somebody's got to really put together a plan that's going to address this, and I suppose this Mr. Cooley, is that right, that you'll be doing that, but I don't think, I think we have these many folks coming. I think we ought to let them have a little time here just to tell us what their take about all this is and give us some feedback. So that's one thing. And this group here can decide maybe how they want to do that. And between now and workshop 2, you're not going to be hearing from any of us unless you one-on-one call us or ask us for our input or something. I don't know how this might work, but I think there's probably 4 or 5 folks on here that if you could get them to volunteer and participate and use them as a little tool, as a sounding device, as you're thinking about this stuff over the next few weeks before workshop 2 takes place, maybe you could get some more intimate feedback. Just an idea. And as we get more seriously down the road on what we want to do policy-wise and procedure-wise, you mentioned there may be a necessity for some state legislation. So once we get to some of these ideas that might require something as far as how we can actually implement policies, and that's allowable within the state, you need to help give us some direction there. And the fourth thing is, I don't know if you're planning, you gave us 4 or 5 good examples of some things that are really happening, and some of them are different from the others. Are you thinking there's going to be any necessity for a small group maybe to visit 1 or 2 of these places to get better ideas about how these things might work? That's my comments. They're not questions, but anyway.
Okay. Well, I'll respond to some of the comments, as best we can. I think there needs to be a process for, between now and workshop 2, for us to understand what the issues are, what questions there are of the SWAC, what type of information you were looking for us to present. Again, if you look at our scope of work, you'll get some ideas on what we thought about. But I think that's important, and whether it be a working group, conference calls, I mean, that's something we need you to sort of figure out as to what makes sense. We're happy to, I think it's a large group to get on one call. Can you imagine 15 people trying to talk at once on that? But nonetheless, we're happy to do whatever it takes to do this. We're also available by email and things of that nature. But I think it is important to get some direction as to what will help you, make decisions and craft those things. In terms of like the outreach, I think that's a wonderful idea to open up, the meetings to that. Dave Cooley and his group have developed already a proposed, detailed plan of outreach, and I think what we're going to do is we're going to share that with all of you, probably through electronics. We'll send it by an email to you to give you a sense for the things that we are recommending be done in terms of how to communicate. But we need guidance. I mean, we're not going to do this in a vacuum. We need to hear from you as to how you want us to do this. And who you are is however you define yourselves to be. How we hear from you is something we need to try to work out, and that's going to be something that needs to happen. In terms of site visits, nothing tells a story like seeing it up hand, in person. We gave you examples from fairly rural communities that were smaller than Rutherford County to ones that were bigger but still growing like Rutherford County in terms of pace, and ones that are much bigger and have been doing this for a long time. And as you probably see, sort of like the level of technology and the level of service goes up with each one. I think it gives you a sense for what others are doing. I think if there are technologies that you're interested in seeing, I'm sure that could be worked out to have visits of them. I think it's important to know what it is that you'd be interested to see. You have a waste energy facility, not too far from here, and that's something that we could probably arrange, or whatever else works for you.
John, I have a question or two, if you don't mind. Mike Cush is my name, and this question may be better answered by Mac Nolan, who is our county solid waste director. But in terms of and if that's the case, this can be done at a later time. But in terms of the contract we currently have with the parent 19 counties that we service and take in trash, I have not viewed that contract. Can we dictate what comes through that trash stream from those counties? And do you know when the expiration date of that contract is? Have you read that document?
The contract you have is a host community agreement. You actually don't have contracts with the other communities. You have a contract with the predecessor to Allied.
Okay.
So it's actually a name of a local, doesn't make any sense from the standpoint of Republic Allied, that sort of thing is the name of it, but that's your contract that the county has, and it expires when the facility reaches capacity.
Okay.
So that's how the agreement currently works. But yeah, in that agreement, it does not give you necessarily the right to say where the waste comes from. It just provides for the benefits that are outlined in the that the county is getting with, and the city is getting. The city the city has a separate agreement from the county, so there's two different agreements. It's not just one agreement.
Okay. All right.
Let me add to that.
Sure.
Can you hear this on?
Yep.
Yep, it's on.
The landfill has a permit with the state. You know, the capacity in the landfill is set in that permit. So they have to operate under the terms of the permit. And it's up to the private company to, seek supply that it wants, to get it into the facility. Republic has a transfer station, arrangement in Nashville that brings a lot of waste from Davidson County. And there's other, transfer stations that, feed into the landfill as well that may be owned by them or may be owned by other private companies or by counties or cities.
Right.
That's how it works. But your contract, the city has a host community agreement also. Those two agreements just relate to, the relationship with the host communities. And as John said, there's no term in those contracts. They terminate when the landfill's full. So if the landfill stays open, that agreement is in place. Those agreements are in place.
Right. When that landfill becomes full in terms of TDEC or the state, can Republic apply for a variance to go higher, to increase the height of that landfill?
Jeff, you want to comment on that?
Or have they already? They can't? They can. Yeah, okay. All right. It's good to know for later on. Switching gears a little bit on recycling, and you talked about MRFs, or material recycling facilities. Okay, got that. Are those, profitable may not be the right word, but are those feasible for counties to build and operate? Are they a lost leader, or do they somewhat pay for themselves? And are the benefits there by keeping that material out of the landfill that, you're not sure which one wants to answer this question, I understand.
We both have the same answer.
Okay, good. Well, let's hear it.
All right. If we don't, that'll be an interesting thing. So the issue recently has been in this country that material values have been low.
Yes.
With recyclables are a traded commodity internationally. We've experienced global trade that has benefited this country. A lot of our recycling is exported, especially on the coasts. And China was a big recipient of our recyclables. They clamped down a few years ago on receiving recyclables, and that helped to change our pricing structure, and actually the value has dropped. A second thing that has happened is, we've talked about the single stream and the dual stream, meaning that all recyclables go in one container, or all recyclables, all paper in one, and all containers in one. That's dual stream. With the advent of single stream recycling, that has caused more contamination. So when you have one big container, just you throw in my rubber hose, maybe it'll get recycled. My plastic toys. There's a lot more contamination that has occurred, and large companies that are in the waste business, like Republic, like Waste Management, have now changed the way they are operating MRFs to the extent that that they do not want to take the risk on the value of the material coming out of the MRFs. So if the markets are good, they can be profitable. The processing costs are fairly fixed. And when markets are good, the facilities make money. Over the last 5 years, the markets have been down. Part of it's the economy, part of it's the green fence, this China thing. who knows, in terms of international markets, what really is going to change. But because the markets have been down and contamination's high, the operators of facilities want to de-risk themselves. So they are going to demand a processing fee regardless of the value of the materials. And the risk is put on the public entities. Now, if you operate it themselves, you have that risk both ways, either way. If you have a private operator, which most recycling facilities out there right now are becoming privately operated, many privately owned, but privately operated, and they will not take the risk on the commodity values anymore.
Okay.
I think that the issue, and actually, I think the consensus right now is that recycling is not profitable, and that it may require a subsidy from time to time to make it more, work.
So John, then, one option I guess we could do, which now sounds totally prohibitive, would be to go into the existing landfill and harvest out some of those recyclables, which would obviously be contaminated. So even in a good market, that sounds like not even worth discussing.
So that's actually a technology called landfill mining.
Right.
And first of all, it's not your landfill to mine. It's Republic's landfill.
Right.
So keep that in mind. Although the Class 3 landfill that you have may have some metal in it that you want to mine. Oftentimes, landfills are mined for cover material. They're mined for, to create some capacity, things of that nature. I think if you were looking at mining landfills to get the values out and think it's going to be profitable, I'd say there's no way. That's a venture that would make sense from a economics perspective.
Okay. One last statement, then I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the council here. Recycling certainly is an important issue for the city and the county. Mac Nolan's group has tried really hard to get the ball rolling on community involvement and some advertising, but he's got a really, really low budget, and he's trying really hard to get MTSU students involved because they're cheap, and they're
and creative,
but he's gone about as far as he can go with that idea. We really need almost a PR firm or an advertising firm that can pick up the ball and really get the message out to the whole county and city. Do you have any recommendations or firms that you have dealt with in the past that can really take our message up to the big boy level?
Well, Cooley's here right now.
Okay.
That's their role. That's their role as from the standpoint of this project, and from the standpoint of the messaging from this group. They're here to help craft a professional message, whether it be symbols, whether it be slogans, ideas, ways to message. That's the type of firm that is there, and that they're on our team to help do that very thing. Now they're not here to do it as part of implementation.
Right.
And we do recommend firms like Cooley, to do that kind of work. But Dave doesn't volunteer, as neither do I.
We would accept a pro bono donation now.
Right, we understand that. So it is a question of budget, but we do think that there is value to all that kind of thing. And I think part of developing this strategic plan will likely involve an education component. How detailed you want to get with that, in terms of outside help. I mean, I agree that Mac's done a great job. We love his little video that he did. I think that, plays in theaters before the movies. We saw them and we're like, wow, that's pretty good. So you can get creative, especially with local talent, but especially depending on what you're doing and what kind of messaging you need, professional help is out there.
Thank you.
Could I ask one question more? In looking at extending the life of the landfill, actually the commodity that is there is the landfill.
That's
and being
correct.
able to dispose of trash in the landfill. So if we as a county and a city develop a major recycling program, and this is kind of playing the devil's advocate, this is actually benefiting Republic. Right?
Well, again, think about the fact that
So what's going to keep them from letting other municipalities fill up what space we would not have filled up.
I think we discussed this a while back at our city council meeting, and that quite a bit. And or you guys tell me if I'm wrong. I think it goes back to the contract that you talked about. If we had the ability to dictate to the other municipalities who are coming in, but I think we talked about what it would cost us to implement a recycling program, and luckily we have people within the city who do that. But I think you guys told us at a breakfast one morning that we couldn't recycle enough to be able to extend.
Right. So right now, the county and the city control 80,000 tons, and there's almost 1 million tons that go into that landfill. So even if you recycle half of the waste that you control, that's 40,000 tons. So
the host benefit's going to go away regardless, right?
Once the landfill closes. Now, we'll throw out there that extending the life of this landfill is an option if you want to discuss it. We have actually had preliminary discussions with the public just to understand where their thinking is at. We consider them a partner to the county and the city. You have agreements with them. The decision on whether or not to consider that option is a policy one, and whether or not you're willing to, think of that as something you would want to go forward, or to what extent you want it to go forward. We think technically it could be done, but from the standpoint of whether or not you want it to be done or want to even consider it is up to you.
One sort of follow-on question is I look at the waste management hierarchy and you look at the top two, source reduction and reuse, and then recycling and composting, as the prior to entering really the waste stream, if you will, and the bottom with energy recovery, and then finally just disposal. A couple of questions about that. One is this early, if there's, the early wins, if you were talking about marketing and things like that affect the top two. Again, are there ways to do those things and sort of measure reaction? Like for instance, if we're talking about the recycling center, our recycling centers now, do we know because we have those are assets for us now. Do we know what the financial performance is, and are they at capacity? If we were to go out and all of a sudden got a voluntary response from the county and we, got a 20% increase, what about our current recycling centers and convenience centers? Are they adequate? Could we just take those on, or do we kind of know the capacities of those fixed assets, right, and then what the financial performance is?
Those are the type of questions I think we would look to try to explore and have at discussions at the next. We're not prepared to answer that, that sort of analysis, but that's the type of analysis. That's exactly what we're looking at for you to tell us what do you want to understand in terms of the if-thens of that. And I would venture to guess you've got capacity to handle more recycling, whether it's 20% more, 50% more, I don't know. But how do you get there? What type of resources you need from either policy standpoint, mandating actions, mandating the businesses recycle, mandating the residents recycle.
Well, we
these
talked
are
about the
things
goal
that other
of
people have done.
45%. However you get to that, but as we pursue that goal, and if we saw some early returns and going from approximately 30 to 45%,
right,
what does that mean in the again, just fundamentally, if we have that existing capacity right now, then it is primarily PR and
So some of the analysis we typically do is to look at different, like you said, recovery rates. Well, let's say the generation curves, we understand it's going to generate, and then we look at how much is we're going to recover. How much material then do you need to manage in those different streams? And then what kind of infrastructure do you need to do that? Those are some of the type of things that we would look to talk about at the next meeting again. But we were looking for some direction from you as to what questions you have. So it's important that you think about, what's going to help you to understand what options you want to, consider. Being respectful of your time. It is 8:30. We're happy to continue talking as much as you want.
We've talked about, we've gone through a lot of different things tonight, but and I know we had our timeline that we had on here, so we're thinking February would be workshop 2, but do you have sort of an action plan that you would want us to try to achieve between mid-December and that February date, or things that we need to be working on?
So again, if you look at the goals of, let me go down to the slide that talks about what we hope to accomplish in workshop 2.
Before you do that, I'd like to ask everybody, and how many have read the Maui plan in a lot of detail? You know, gotten into
a lot.
it? Okay.
Define a lot.
All right. Well, a lot meaning at least half of the chapters. Say the
Yeah.
Okay, so we got a few. So you all need to catch up on that. As I was sitting here, I was thinking of pointing you to which chapters to focus on, because it's a big plan, and the appendices have some great background on different subjects. Pay as you throw. Anyone know what that means?
Yeah.
You know, paying by the, the bag, the cart size, to encourage recycling. There was a work session just on that. Construction demolition processing. All the different technologies that you can use for processing, waste and waste energy. The different organizational structures and ways to implement projects. So there's different things in there. I think I'm going to work with John and Kate to identify some articles we've written over in the past about certain subjects, to also give you some reading material to, in addition to the Maui plan is 2 large, 4-inch binders when you print it out. It's very substantial. Question?
In essence, what you need from this group is we need to say, hey, what's the cost of a waste to energy for us here? What's the cost to recycle and then waste to energy and then this? Hey, what if we just recycle and we landfill it?
Right.
We have to decide what we need you to research. Is that correct? Right. And then for you to give us the numbers, because in essence, my guess is city council, it's going to come down to cost, correct? As the gentleman down here was saying, if you can ask Mac, let's say 20% goes up at the convenience centers. Mac's budget's fixing to go up because he has to haul 20% more, and he's not getting anything for plastics that he brings to us because they're not worth anything. So now it's going to cost more money even though we're increasing recycling. Now the county has to pay more money because of drivers, fuel, and all that. So we have to tell you what we want.
And then there are policy decisions in terms of deciding, do you want to control the waste, how the waste is collected, so that you can invest or see someone invest in infrastructure to build a recycling facility, to build a waste energy facility. Because if it stays uncontrolled, investing in an asset like that or causing someone to invest in an asset like that, it will not get the material it's designed for, or it's going to be a very small amount and it'll be very expensive. So, being able to, consider administrative, institutional structures of how this would be organized is very important as is selecting what services you want to see accomplished and achieved versus what you're doing now. And a lot of what you're doing now has, evolved in major part because the city and the county have that, free residential waste disposal in your host community agreement. If you didn't have that, your system would probably be very different right now.
A couple of the questions that I think, and Harvey's touched on them a little bit, is, sort of like the typical asking scenarios: who, what, when, where. Right now, there's not an organization that, is set up to implement something on behalf of the city and the cities, communities, municipalities, and the county. So from the standpoint of advising the city and the county as to what to do, who's going to do it? Is it going to be, are you going to ask the county to take that on? Do you want to create a special purpose entity, like an authority that would be a combination of, memberships between folks? But eventually someone's going to have to do something if you want to do something. And who is that going to be? And how are you going to organize? So that is something that when we were hired by the working group of the city and the county, we were asking, like, what is one of the challenges going to be? And we're like, well, getting to a decision, getting to, making a decision and having a decision-making body. that is going to be able to plan this forward. And I'm not saying it could be, I think in my opinion, it's probably either the county or some entity you create, like an authority, that would have its own, board, its own, organization, maybe its own funding structures through whatever rates you set. So that's one thing. And then what do you want to do? What do you want your goals to be? How do you want to do it? When do you want to do it? Those are the type of things that need to be asked for your vision. But I do want to emphasize the who aspect of that, because that is something that I don't want to take lightly. Eventually, let's say you go back to your communities and the county and say, hey, we recommend this. Everyone's going to look up in the air and say, well, and part of our charge was to try to come up with a framework for implementation. You're going to need someone to actually do whatever you plan to do. Whether, again, you're giving that to the county or you're going to do something else. And actually, one of the things we thought about is if you wanted to partner with other counties, you would even need to have a different organization that took that on. So that's, there's a lot to think about there, but I think that's an important aspect. And that is something that we were hoping to accomplish at the next. So if you look at slide 50, I just pulled it up, it's the options for organization. And I think that's an important aspect that we would want to cover. Your thinking on that, start to get input, start to put some thoughts to that. We can look at examples of what other people do if you want. We need to hear from you what's going to help you make that, how they're organized, what they do, what kind of budgets they operate, et cetera. From the standpoint of what you do, whether it be looking at recycling options and capacities of landfills or technologies, that sort of thing would be things too that we would want to understand. What kind of analysis are you looking for? So I think those are some of the things that we need to hear back from you between now and February. Hopefully, give us a little time to do some of the work too. So we think that there needs to be some communication in December and in early January back to us or back and forth with us to help us prepare for the next workshop.
That's what I was sort of saying about at least a small working group. Why don't you develop for us 8 or 10 or 12 key things that you need information about from which we can discuss at workshop 2 in writing and send that to all of us. Either you can send it to us and we can respond, or you can have a few conference calls, whatever you want to do, but put something down that makes us respond to what we need to give you to help give you some direction on where you want to take us.
Okay, we can do that.
I would make the recommendation. We've just recently, we're not finished yet, but we went through a 20-year comprehensive plan for the entire city. I think y'all are familiar with that.
Right.
But we had really good input on a couple of different social media interactions where we used a group called Mind Mixer. But we had a lot of residents who were interactive with that. And when you look at the size of the county, and obviously we've got 60 people who are here tonight, I guess, in that number, and we hope that we have a lot more input than just the people who are here. So finding how we can reach out to the residents globally to get input back is going to be imperative for us to see which direction that they're looking for us to head.
I think our recommendation will be to not wait until the next workshop to start to put stuff out there. We'll work with Dave's group to come up with ideas that will float by you and try to get some feedback from you as to, press releases, maybe some social media. Maybe we put up some opinion polls, some opinion questionnaires on the county's website, the municipal websites, whatever you want to do, and be able to pull some information back. Our process is limited, if you will, by our scope, and we want to try and get as much as we can done and get as much input to you through that process. So I think the type of input you got through your comprehensive plan, we can use some of the similar strategies for this group as well. But we're not going to do that without your direction, and without your guidance. We'll give you ideas, but I think we're relying on you to kind of tell us what you want us to put out.
Okay, does anyone have any more questions? Andrew?
Is there a central point of contact, I mean, one individual contact that we would make to, you know, if we have just ideas or things that we want to throw out there between now and whenever that next meeting happens, that, you know, I mean, for instance, there is a lot to think about in terms of how is the structure going forward, whether it's a countywide system or whether it's a countywide system with some kind of clearly written opt-in for to consider other communities outside the county, et cetera, and those are ideas that some of us might want to flesh out and just kind of throw out there to the group, but without bombarding everybody's email or something like that. Is there a central contact where somebody might gather those ideas into some kind of format to?
Well, from our standpoint, you know, I would probably offer myself up as a project manager for our group to be from the consulting side, and we can help to respond to any questions, you know, from the SWAC, if that's what you're looking for from that standpoint. And we, you know, I think our goal would be to disseminate, though. I mean, this would be like an exchange of ideas. Probably we would recommend having as much, you know, if you had questions, probably sharing them to that group.
And that's kind of why I ask if there's a central point, because I don't mean it to be cloak and dagger. I mean, somewhere where these questions or concepts will be made available to.
Maybe the questions can go into John, the questions and answers will go out to everyone.
Right, yeah, something like that could work too.
Just to keep everyone's email not being clogged.
Right.
I think would be a good way to do it.
That's good. We see that a lot with procurements, you know. People ask a lot of questions and the government goes back out with all the questions and all the answers, and I think that's something would make sense here too, just to make sure we're sharing everyone's information out there without, like you said, clogging emails. We all get too many emails.
And I think, John, after the first of the year, everyone could expect an email with a reading assignment. You know, I know we got the holidays coming up. I think clogging your in-baskets with more things to read between now with the holidays is probably not productive. But, you know, right after all those, or even during some of those bowl games that will happen on the first and after, that first week, we will send you a reminder about Maui and point you to the chapters, as well as give you some other articles to read on this subject.
I think we do have a football team here locally that's going to be in Hawaii over the bowl break, playing in the Hawaii Bowl. So,
well, are you all going to see them play? Because we could arrange a site visit at one of the landfills.
No.
But the city of Murfreesboro has agreed to take this group to the ballgame.
There is a waste energy facility in Oahu, in Honolulu, on Oahu Island, and they also have, you know, some good curbside recycling programs going on there, and deposit legislation in Hawaii. It's called High Five, and it's a nickel on every, you know, container on drinking, you know, for soda and alcohol beverages and water bottles, and it recovers a lot of material because their land is limited.
You have anything else you want? I think I can speak for Mayor Burgess. We can, yes, sir.
Is the Maui plan out on the internet someplace where everybody can look at it?
Just Google it. Maui solid waste management plans on the Maui website.
And also,
County of Maui.
And also, what was the payback on the plan in Fort Myers, the durating plan?
When you say payback, what do you mean?
Doesn't make a profit.
Its cost is about, I think, about $80 per ton. If you just isolated that facility, and the cost per household in the county with their system, because it's a large system, is in the high 20s per household per month. So that overall, for all that system, that $80 is in there. Even though that element is expensive, there's other elements in economy scale and so on.
I didn't get all these. It's $20 per month per household.
That supports the whole system. That, by the way, would be, if you're thinking of a field trip and you had to pick one place, that would be a good place to go. It's a little larger than you, but it had the issues that you're having in terms of there was nothing there, 25, 30 years ago, and they evolved into this system. There's, I think, 4 or 5 cities in the county that have interlocal agreements. They're larger cities than yours, but it's the same concept. And how they've organized would be I think a good case study. And they, again, have, ended up with a system that has supported a high growth rate, and it's a zero waste to landfill in terms of.
You're speaking about
where they
Fort
are.
Myers?
County.
Fort Myers. And there are, I believe, nonstop nonstop flights southwest to Fort Myers, which would make
Trip down there.
it pretty easy to get to.
Okay. Well, want to speak, I think, speaking on behalf of Mayor Burgess, which he doesn't allow me to do very much, but thank you all for taking part in the invitation of this council. It's a Monday night at 9 o'clock, and you're obviously not getting paid for this, so sorry, Chris. So we appreciate you spending your time and the time that you're going to spend over really the next year in helping not only study, but hopefully make a recommendation and also see this through implementation. So we really appreciate it. Can't tell you how much we appreciate you spending your time, and look forward to meaningful dialogue in the many months to come. John, we thank y'all, and I don't guess since we're not a governmental group yet, or if maybe one of these days there's no need to stand adjourned because thank y'all for coming. That's right.